Well, hi everyone. My name is Carla Ria DeFlorio, and I am DBSA's Chapter Relations Director. And we call it a Zoom jockey for this session. Welcome to this year's Leadership Summit, and we're so glad you're here. We're excited to have you join us for this session. During the session, you're welcome to put your questions in the chat, and the presenters will answer them by the end of the presentation, time permitting.
Yeah, if I knew the address, I would.
I'm going to ask all of you to go on mute. I'm going to mute you myself. Okay. So lastly, what I wanted to say is at the conclusion of our session and during your downtime between any Leadership Summit sessions, please visit our lounge where you can relax, you can take part in meditative exercises, or just learn more about DBSA exercise resources. So with that, I am going to go ahead and turn it over to our speakers for today's session. Bridget Mall, who is the president of Greater Chicago DBSA, and Bonnie Rosenthal, who is a longtime facilitator, and she has a group called DBSA Hope and Cope. So with that, it's all yours.
Thanks, Carla. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for attending our session today. My name is Bridget Mall. Like Carla said, I am the president of the DBSA Greater Chicago chapter. We are one of two of the longest standing chapters. So I am delighted to have you guys here today to discuss everything we learned from COVID. A little bit about me and my journey to DBSA. I joined the board of directors of my chapter in 2012, and I've been serving ever since. Essentially, I had a family member who was had an episode and was diagnosed bipolar completely out of nowhere. The doctor recommended that we go attend the support groups to learn more. And so we did and never looked back. So in my full-time job, I work as an attorney in Chicago. I'm obviously a volunteer for my chapter. I'm currently serving as president, and I'll hand it off to my co-host Bonnie to tell us a little bit about herself as well.
Hi, thank you, Bridget, and thank you, Carla, for doing our intro, and thank you, everybody, for attending this afternoon. Again, my name is Bonnie Rosenthal. I'm currently with DBSA Hope and Cope. I've been involved in the organization, which originally was the National Depression and Manic Depression Association. So I've been involved basically since January of '99. When I attended, because I have lived with depression the better part of my life. Over 21 years, I've done various things with various different chapters. I've been facilitating since 2000. I've also been a lending library coordinator. I founded a group. I've been a president and co-founded DBSA Hope and Cope, which is an all virtual group. And it's wonderful to have you here. And I love talking to both experienced leaders as well as prospective. Thank you. Bridget.
Great. Thanks, Bonnie. All right. So a little bit about what we're going to learn in today's session. Essentially, by the end of this session, you should be able to describe how DBSA local organizations converted support groups from in-person to virtual meetings, obviously due to the pandemic. Articulate at least 3 learnings from DBSA chapters and support groups, and explain how DBSA local organizations plan to move forward as a result of everything that we've learned from COVID. Carla, you want to go to the next slide, please? So we're going to first talk about before COVID, pre-COVID. How were things done? What did anyone know what Zoom was? Did we know what Google Meet was? Lots of things weren't really done virtual at the time. So we're going to kind of go through that. We're going to talk about what the initial pandemic response was, aside from panic. We're going to talk about what we did during the pandemic, and then all the lessons we learned from how we kind of shifted from pre-COVID to a current COVID world. All right, Carla, next slide. So a little bit about pre-pandemic thoughts and approaches. I think the general consensus pre-pandemic was get out of the house, go to a support group. It will help you feel better. And then we also, what is Zoom? What is Google? We didn't have those types of things. And I think one of the sentiments, at least in my chapter, and I know Bonnie can talk more on this, a virtual group would never work. We had a lot of that in on our board of directors. We have some people who were just not technologically savvy, people who had a firm belief that leaving the house would definitely help. And so they never wanted to do anything via video because, they were afraid of being locked in the house and, not getting any sort of social interaction. So Bonnie, do you want to touch on your pre-pandemic thoughts and kind of what your chapter was like pre-pandemic?
Actually, the group I was involved with pre-pandemic was the chapter of DBSA Sakasana. We had at least 14 people consistently there. In groups, we were split into typically 2 or 3 different rooms. Everybody knew one another. There was, virtual. What was that? Was basically the concept by which we existed, and people went out after, typically to a diner, and there was socialization that was happening as well.
Yeah, and in my group, in my chapter, we had about 8 different support groups all over the Chicagoland area, and we had the same sentiment. What is Zoom? What is Google Meets? Like, we didn't do anything virtual. So what was your chapter's thoughts or your support group's thoughts on moving from in-person to virtual? How did you guys kind of make that shift? Bonnie?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought that's when the poll was going up. I
Oh, no,
apologize.
not yet. Just like between us, how did you guys make the shift from?
Oh, okay. Basically, the president of the chapter decided to get the Zoom world up and running, and 1 minute we were in person and the next minute we were virtual. And he brought some of the facilitators onto a test Zoom call to get a sense of what was involved with it, and that was basically what happened.
Yeah, our chapter kind of did the same thing. We actually ended up, I think we probably took a 2-week break so that we could figure out what Zoom was and how to set it up and how we were going to navigate it. And then essentially what we did is we picked a weekday and decided that we were going to host a group weekly via Zoom, because that was kind of our only option. It was at the point where everything was shut down, so there wasn't really an option for any of our venues to host the support groups there. So what about everyone else? Let's make this a little interactive. I've been told that our polling is not working.
I have access to the polls.
Oh, great.
So I can share, but both questions are on the one poll. So I'll go ahead and share that now if you want to take that slide and talk about it.
Okay, great. So where was your primary location for your meetings pre-pandemic? So I know for my chapter, we had meetings at Northwestern Hospital. We had meetings at Evanston Hospital. We had a meeting in a church on the south side. We also had a library, which would probably go under other. We had absolutely no online meetings. And we actually didn't have any in doctor's offices or recovery centers. So it looks like some people are answering. Most of you had local hospitals. What about you guys, Bonnie? Where did you guys meet?
We were meeting in a church.
Okay. So local hospital, local church seems to be primarily where everyone was meeting. And then how about after the shutdown in spring 2020? Did everyone's group start meeting virtually? It looks like 83% said yes, 17% said no. So for those of you who said no, do you have any comment on that? Why didn't you guys meet virtually? Was it just lack of planning, or you didn't think it would work? Anyone out there care to share?
If you want to put it in the chat box, that works too.
All right, well, All right, we can go to the next slide. Was that, yeah, oh, here we go, great. Okay, so I think we can all agree all the chapters were equally blindsided. Our local support groups had to pivot and form online support groups. And like we just witnessed, some did, some didn't. Majority, according to our poll for everyone who's here today, majority did end up pivoting to online support groups, virtual support groups. And then of course, some did not. There was local networks that came together to support each other, to learn the technology. I know Bonnie did a lot of work with this on teaching people how to use Zoom. Bonnie, do you want to tell us about that a little bit?
Well, basically what I tell people is I'm on the high end of the autism spectrum. So if there was background noise or somebody was having issues with their mute, unmute, or more than one device, that was very physically and emotionally very painful to me brain-wise. So I learned how to use Zoom. And then after I learned how to use Zoom as a participant and as a host, I basically wrote up two workbooks, one that could be sent to participants, one that could be sent to hosts, and started also through DBSA teaching fellow facilitators, as that was one of the blocks to people facilitating meetings on Zoom, was they felt that they didn't understand it very well in order to be able to do so. The other thing was that I did a lot of teaching around was the fact of how to maintain the safe place in reference to hosting a meeting on Zoom, and the different steps that can be taken to try to assure the best safety you can.
And what steps were those?
Okay, so Zoom says, and Zoom, if you're not aware, is they're grassroots. I mean, they're huge now, but they are really grassroots folks who do a lot of training of people. Basically, things like the waiting room, things like not blasting out the Zoom ID and passcode. Things like we don't do it, but you can lock the meeting after everybody's in, which does not allow people to come in after. I always tell people, I believe in the concept that taking steps to prevent a Zoom bomber goes a lot further than what you have to do if you end up with a Zoom bomber. So I always tell people, take all the steps you can, and you do the best you can.
Bridget and Bonnie, I wanted to let you know, draw your attention to a comment in the chat box from Laura. I'm going to say Laura K, because I don't want to mispronounce it. She said, our group was good about using breakout rooms in the sessions attended. The hosts could split the large group in to have a better session. So I think that was going on. Do either of you want to comment on that?
Yeah, Laura, that's actually a really good point to bring up. And I'm glad that you did, because I actually just had this conversation with one of our peer support group facilitators a couple days ago, because she mentioned to me that at some point they have to make a decision on when they're going to split people into two separate groups to make sure that everyone has enough time to talk and to share what they need to share and to get out what they need to, what they came to the meeting for. And so I asked the question, I said, what is the number? What is the number when you're going to decide to break out? And so to me, she said, it depends on the people. It depends on who comes in when, because if you have someone come in an hour through the session and it's a 2-hour meeting, you don't want to break everyone up in the middle of it, because they're going to miss the first, or they're going to miss what they've been listening to the whole time. So her answer to me was, if it hovers around between 18 and 25, we split into two different groups. So I think that that's a good number. I think 10, especially if you only have between an hour or 2 hours, I think 10 is a good number. Bonnie, have you seen this? What have you guys been using the breakup rooms at all?
We have The answer is kind of. We go based upon the number of between 8 and 11 being the magic number of the breakout. When we were at 11, we asked people and said, if anybody feels like they need more time to talk tonight, we're going to do breakout rooms to, and if we stay at 11, the acknowledgement that we may not be able to spend a whole lot of time with people. So we empower our group members to make the best of decisions.
Great, thanks. And then just so everyone knows, Bonnie's got a pet bird who's just being vocal right now. So that's what that noise is. So don't be alarmed. She's not getting attacked or anything. No one's flying in her window. She's just got a vocal bird right now. So, and I have a dog too. So if he barks, that's what's going on. This is the virtual world, you know, we're living in it right now. And
if
Laura,
you saw the opening session, you saw baby Gabriel in the opening clips. So that's proof.
Awesome. So yeah, Bonnie says he's singing. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. Okay, so Laura, so your group was about 24, so you had breakout rooms of about 12. I think that's a good number. I mean, I think we kind of all are on the same page with that. All right, Carla, can you still pull up the March slide? I think we had 2 more points to go through on that. One is online programming, and the other is online support groups attracting different groups of attendees. So why don't we go through attracting different groups first? I'd like to hear kind of maybe from everybody what your chapter or your group experienced when it came to attracting different groups of people via Zoom. Did you have higher numbers? Did you have lower numbers? Did you see people that you've never seen before? Did you have the same people who are attending the groups come to the virtual groups as well? Does anyone want to volunteer any of that information? Why don't we start with Bonnie just to get it started?
So in reference to DBSA Sakasana, many of the people did not like Zoom. And they started actually doing quite well during the pandemic. So many of those folks were also facilitators. So unfortunately, they have not returned, many of those folks. We did start getting new people with DBSA Hope and Cope. We're a separate support group that formed during the pandemic. And many of you know through chapters that you have to attach a town to your chapter. So we attached the town of Hope, New Jersey, which geographically worked because there was nothing out that far in New Jersey, but it also allowed us to build on it to create Hope and Cope. So there are people who are attracted to our group through playing off of the name. I've attended other support groups and meetings and been able to invite people. So we have people from out of state. We have people from all over New Jersey, as well as out of state, because there is no barrier to turning on the computer and going with it. And you guys are all more than welcome to attend. You know.
Thanks, Bonnie. And then let me just run through a couple of the comments we have on the chat, and then Stephen, we'll go to you. So Laura mentioned that she went more often in virtual than went in person, which actually really makes sense. It's so convenient. I mean, personally for me, not having to wake up in the morning and shower and get on the train to rush to work, I mean, and then rush home after, I mean, it's saving myself like 3 or 4 hours a day. And then, you know, you have more energy to do other things. And it's so easy to just click a button and join a group. So I'm glad to hear that. Eileen mentioned they had lower numbers at first, but it did pick up a little. And Eileen, I think that could partly be due to, you know, when it first started happening and the lockdown first went into effect, I really think people thought it was only going to be a couple weeks. I mean, we didn't really know what we were in for, which turned out to be a long, wild ride that we're still riding. And then National, Carla chimed in and said many of our West Coast chapters had much better attendance as a result of not having to battle traffic. Literally exactly what I just said. That makes total sense. Laura mentioned traffic's bad in Atlanta. That's why she attended more. Yep. And then many chapters have seen different groups of people. Cindy mentioned most of her members attended virtually as time went on, more and more members join. So I think we probably see a trend here where it's picking up the longer it goes, because I think people are realizing the longer this goes, the more support that I need. And again, with traffic, it's definitely a time saver to click a button and join a group and get the help that you need. And then one more, Stephen, and we're off to you. At DBSA Boston, Jennifer said we had many groups already and even expanded even more to Zoom meetings every day. We had a mix of new people and those who came in person. Great. Go ahead, Stephen. What did you see in your group?
Sure. Well, yeah, I'm the facilitator for DBSA in Wichita, Kansas, and we're the the most populous city in Kansas if you don't count the suburbs of Kansas City, which is Missouri. But we haven't had a huge group before the pandemic, in Wichita, but I think we've kept about the same number throughout the pandemic. I was able to pretty quickly switch to Google Hangouts at the time because it was free.
Great.
And we've been able to keep a good consistent group there. But what I've mostly noticed was that a lot of rural folks, which you can imagine there's a lot of area of Kansas that's not covered by any DBSA groups. People 2 or 3 hours away from, the nearest actual meeting have been able to join us for that. So it's been really nice to be able to outreach to some folks. And we even had a former member of the group who had moved to Florida at one point, but had not clicked with the group there and was able to rejoin us for the virtual meetings and, act as if she hadn't gone anywhere, which was great. So.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm glad to hear that the people who are in the rural areas came to get support. That's another that's another demographic that has a need for it, but not necessarily is, in the proximity of an in-person meeting. So I think virtual is huge. And, like Bonnie said, her group had people coming from all over the country, and they still do. So I think that's great. Amy, did you have a question? Did you want to comment? You could unmute.
I don't have my headphones on, so I'm sorry if it's echoing, but Hope and Cope, I'm in Athens, Georgia, but I've been going to Hope and Cope for a year.
That's great. Awesome. So you're the perfect example of the type of people that we're talking about from other areas attending groups. Great. Thank you. Denise said with the pandemic, her group lost focus and did not meet as often. Denise, are you talking about in person or virtual? All right, maybe Denise will chime back in when she has the chance. Jennifer said at DBSA Boston, oh no, I said that one already. Oh, Roger said we had lower numbers at first. Some quit altogether and still haven't come back. We started with breakout rooms, but usually did better with a bit larger groups since people got confused with transferring back and forth. Yeah, that makes sense. They ended up meeting 7 days a week, but they were lacking facilitators. Roger, do you want to comment any more on that? Where are you from? What group do you lead? You got to unmute in the bottom left corner. There it is.
Louisville, Kentucky.
Okay.
Chapter, and we branch out also in southern Indiana and also other parts of Kentucky. But yeah, we had, like I said, a pretty good start out when it came. Like I said, we lost some people. Still haven't had them come back. They just want to do in-person meetings. And one of the things I did see, I think, and I'm not sure if it was good or bad, like I said, we ended up with 7 days of meetings, and we usually had the same people coming back night after night, to a point of where they became very dependent on Zoom. And, it's just, like I said, we ended up with 7 days and pretty much the same people coming back all the time. So after the vaccination started, people were asking, when can we get back to in-person meetings? And there was a lot of demand for that. We since started that, but it took off okay for the first week. And then after Delta became kind of a fiasco again, now we kind of dropped back in numbers. So we're hopefully that we'll have them in. But we've reduced our 7 days of meeting just down to 3 days. And hopefully that some people will come back to the in-person meetings again.
So do you find that almost when you have a meeting every day that it's too much for people to attend to, so your numbers are lower? Is that why you guys kind of went back to 3 days a week?
No, we didn't. We wanted to take the in-person meeting Zooms away so that those people would have a chance to come to the in-person meetings versus just going to the Zoom meetings. So that was our thinking anyway, that maybe we'd have a little bit bigger numbers. Also, also, like I said, it became kind of ritual. Like I said, you go to Monday's meeting, Tuesday's meeting, Thursday's meeting, Sunday's meeting, Saturdays, and it was the same people all the time. So we were hoping that the in-person would bring out another group that hasn't been active as part of it. So
Okay,
that's our trial.
great. Okay, so you guys are already back to in-person. So I don't know if you guys know, but there is a session specifically dedicated to in-person versus virtual support groups and when to switch back. I actually think that National, and Carla can chime in and correct me if I'm wrong, but there are 2 sessions. One is coming up on Tuesday, and then there's also another one later in the week if you missed the first one, and they'll both be available on recording, right, Carla?
Yeah, Friday is the second one. So if you can't make tomorrow's, which I think is in the first time slot, then Friday is also an option. And it's really going to be a conversation of what people are doing, how they're, what they need to consider. Is contact tracing now something that is a responsibility of a DBSA chapter if they're meeting in person? Those kind of questions. And they're serious questions because the chapters also have to consider the rules of the organization where they meet. So there's all of that as well. So it
Great.
should be pretty interesting conversation.
Awesome. Thanks, Carla. Our board of directors is actually currently debating this issue. So if you don't see all my board members in that meeting, you just let me know because they're supposed to be there.
Okay.
All right, we have a question from Melissa. Do you normally offer 1 or 2 hour support groups, and which is better? I'm going to go ahead and venture a guess to the answer of this question, which is it depends. But Bonnie, do you want to take this one a little bit further?
I'm going to also say it depends. With that being said, because I don't believe there's any black or white, you need to understand if you're not doing Zoom, that it takes longer because when, it's like people have to wait for the concept of being able to share next, where when you're in person, one person can share and the other person, yeah, I know. You can't have that on Zoom. So many times it can take more time for people to say things or for a conversation to be occurring.
So Melissa, is your group doing 1 hour or 2 hours? What have you seen? If you don't mind me reversing the question on you. Maybe Melissa will chime in later if she's available. All right, let's go to Ron's question or comment. Ron mentioned he's from DBSA Berkeley. Hi, Ron. He mentioned we skewed younger with a slight dip in attendance. We still have people with technical problems. So do we. I've got an action item to write up a tech help document because it's still a constant problem. We have former members who moved away rejoin. Well, that's great. That's kind of the beauty of being virtual. Do you have any other comments on that, Ron?
Just what people are saying, reformat our meetings slightly to accommodate Zoom, lots of breakout rooms, and try to help, especially older people who are just, not as tech savvy, get this thing up and running so they can participate. It's been a challenge, but we've been successful with it.
Yeah, it's been a challenge for our chapter too, especially with the older generation who didn't grow up with internet and computers. I think shifting from in-person to virtual was definitely a challenge. For anyone who doesn't know, Zoom themselves, aside from Bonnie and aside from National, actually hold training sessions. So you can go on their website, and they've been holding sessions all throughout the pandemic. And I think it's really to help the population who really isn't tech savvy. So that option is always available. You can always direct your members to go to zoom.com and sign up for one of their sessions.
Yeah, just could I give you a fact that people might be interested to know, that our online groups are skewing much younger. 37% of the people who attend our national online support groups are under the age of 30. That's a population that everybody's been looking for. They're online. That's where they are.
Yeah, we see some other people in the chat box saying 90 minutes, 1 hour. Zoom has good tutorials. Highly recommend them. Yeah, great. Okay, so Jennifer, do you want to share your experience with DBSA Boston and kind of how you guys shifted?
Sure. I believe that we are one of the larger chapters. So what we did was pretty extensive. I was a facilitator before the pandemic, but not like on the board or anything. So the board immediately went, and I think we only had like 1 week where we didn't have group. We meet in the local mental health hospital, and another one of our Boston groups meets in a downtown hospital. And we are not allowed back in, and we have no timetable as to when we will be allowed back in. So we are virtual for the foreseeable future, but it's been so good. We will, are definitely going to keep groups. I will say the board has said that. I'm not on the board. We formed a whole technology committee, and I'm the chair of the technology committee. And so we've been meeting a lot. Our normal Wednesday night groups, we have 5 or 6 groups already. We have 100+ people that would come on Wednesday nights. That's our main thing. Like I said, I think we're one of the bigger places. And so we have a young adults group, mania bipolar group, a depression group, a family and friends group, maintaining stability group. Those are the ones that we've basically kept online. And I would say kind of everybody else's experience, it's probably between like 18 and 25. We started out much smaller, which was good for me as a facilitator, because then I got to kind of grow
Yeah.
with it, because it was very intimidating at first. But I would totally agree with the Zoom trainings. I've gone to a lot of them, and they're very good. And then we have this whole kind of, I guess, your Zoom jockey type thing. We have what we call a tech buddy, so that the facilitator can just facilitate, because it's really hard to do. And so that's kind of what our technology committee, that's part of what we do, and kind of training people to do that. So it is difficult because you do have to have facilitators, and then you have to have the tech buddies. But one thing, there were already in-person groups, drop-in groups that were like 4 days a week. But now, since the pandemic, those all of the other groups have continued. And then they added, there are now daytime groups happen every day now. I think all we added was a Sunday group, but then on Tuesdays we added a women's group in our daytime slot, and we on Wednesdays in the afternoon, we have our main meetings in the evening, but on Wednesdays they started a dual diagnosis group.
Wow, so you guys got a lot going on.
Yeah, we do. And so, like I said, we're one of the bigger chapters, but I was really grateful just for my own personal mental health that things went online right away. And it's been really a mixture of people who come. I mean, there were some people who'd never been in person that caught on to us right at the beginning, which was a little odd, because I was used to like the people in person. So now, I have a ton more new friends who I've only had virtually. But anyway, I could probably talk all day, so I'll stop, because you need to get back. But
Okay, great. So thank you. That was awesome information. I think one of the key takeaways from what Jennifer said is Zoom buddies. That is genius. And I think we could all take a page out of her book and make sure that you have a Zoom buddy, because if you're in the middle of things, you're talking, you're facilitating, you don't really realize that people are coming in the waiting room. So that is key. And I think that's maybe one of the top things that we actually took out of COVID, at least in my chapter, was make sure you have a buddy to navigate Zoom with you. All right, Carla, can you pull those slides back up? We're going to run through one of the last points on the slide that we were just on, that I wanted to touch on just a little bit, was online programming. So I don't know if any of the other groups did any sort of online programming to keep their participants engaged and occupied. That was huge for our group in Chicago. While we did do the support groups, we did those on Wednesday and Sunday nights. We recently added an ages 50+ group for Thursday, every other Thursday, or twice a month, second and fourth Thursdays. But we also did all kinds of weekly programming. We wanted to keep our people engaged and kind of out of the dumps because we were on lockdown when this all started. We couldn't go anywhere. We couldn't socialize. So we tried to bring socialization to the home. We hosted yoga. We had music therapy, which we actually still do weekly. You all are welcome to attend anytime you want. It's Tuesdays at noon. You can sign up for any of these classes on our website. I know there's some other chapters who did coloring. We hosted a cooking class twice a month. We brought in educational speakers almost, I would say probably 3 times a month in the beginning, and now maybe a little bit less. I know there's some groups who are talking about hosting dinners. We did a cooking class where you buy the ingredients in advance. I don't know if any of you are coming to the cooking class, but it's actually right after this session. So that was just kind of like an example of other things that we did that were outside of support groups that we try to, help our members and support them. Go ahead, Carla, next slide, please. So what about everyone else? Really quick, because we only have a few minutes left. Pop in the chat anything you did aside from support groups, and let us know what kind of creative programming you guys had. And then it looks like Bonnie, just going back, it looks like Bonnie answered that question about adhering to the Zoom guidelines. She said, prevention is key. We have included some of these aspects directly into our guidelines. People have to agree to them to get the Zoom ID, and then we review them at the start of each meeting. So that's a good idea. Bonnie, do you want to tell us maybe just a little bit more about that? Do you read out your guidelines at the beginning of each meeting?
Yeah, so we had, it kind of dates back a tiny bit. The first group I was involved in, they only had spoken guidelines, and they ended up needing to suspend or expel somebody from the group who was a real problem. Behavior was a real problem. And at the time I said, how are you getting rid of somebody from the group? It's not like they agreed in writing to adhere to these. So when Sakasana began, we had group guidelines and agreement that you had to sign. Even if you just initialed and your writing was not, or just put your first name and your last initial. So what we were able to do with Hope and Cope is we don't give out our Zoom ID. That is one of the steps we take for security. You have to contact us either by telephone or by email. And if you contact us by telephone, we're going to do an email exchange. You have to agree to our guidelines before you can even get the Zoom ID. We're not saying, oh, okay, tell us about yourself. Okay, you have this diagnosis. No, you can't come. We're just saying, here's our guidelines. Please keep these in mind. And can you agree to these? And so we are still getting somebody to actually read them and acknowledge them before they come to the meeting. And then we do review them. We share a screen and we take turns reading them prior to each meeting. We can't expect people to adhere to a guideline that they are not aware of. So we need to make sure that people are directly aware of what's expected of us.
Great. Thanks, Bonnie. I think that's a good idea to read everything in the beginning. So some other things that people mentioned was a song circle, an open mic night, which I love that. That's a great idea. Bringing in comedy, I think, is huge. Someone said we had a lot of chat activity between the group meetings. Stephen mentioned that he shared a few videos via screen sharing on Zoom to start some good discussions. That's a great idea. They used a private Facebook group to share information. So let's run back to the slides. We have about 5 minutes left. Oh, Ron said they end with a sing-along. That's great. And then there was one other comment about, from Alvin, their Zoom groups skewed younger, generally grown over time. They included a number of older alumni who moved out of the area and can no longer come conveniently to in-person meetings. That's great. All right, so let me just run through what we learned today. We obviously learned the power of volunteer network. This is what we learned over COVID, not just today, but the volunteer network with DBSA is so strong. I think I've heard from a lot of different chapters, and it seems like everyone adjusted immediately, which is great. Collective knowledge here cannot be matched. As you can see, even just from this short session, we have a lot of different people in a lot of different areas. Geographic boundaries and attracting people from all over the world was huge. With the internet nowadays, anything can happen. And I think that the pandemic is the perfect way, not the perfect way, but it really launched us into coming into the 21st century and using the technology that's available to us. And I know Bonnie wanted to mention something about the chapter chats. So Bonnie, you go right ahead.
Thank you, Bridget. If you are not aware, there are chapter chats which began at the beginning of COVID. DBSA National, they are currently held on the 4th Wednesday of the month from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Time, alternating with the 4th Monday from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Used to be that the staff would bring in information that was going on in DBSA. Now it's really going to be very topic specific. So last month we had some diversity, equity, and inclusion information. We're going to be having some advocacy information, different topics led by peers. The other thing is the peers created something called Chapter Leadership Connection meetings. Those are held every Wednesday, except for when a chapter chat is held, but they're held every Wednesday from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. They are moderated by peers. You don't need to be a board member. You don't need to be a facilitator. You come, everybody shares a topic or a challenge that they're dealing with. They get to hear from chapters all over the country, all different topics. As I said, we take turns moderating the meeting. And then at 2 p.m., they say, okay, CLC is over. And there's usually like a social party, basically, of people from all over the country. I know Alvin is here as part of CLC. Ron is part of CLC. Kathy is part of CLC. And I think Cindy has come a few times as well. I encourage you to attend. The benefit of being able to meet with fellow group leaders is just amazing.
Great. No, sorry, go ahead, Bonnie.
That's okay. If you're not on the email list that Jill sends out every week, ask Jill to put you on her list, and that's how you will get that Zoom ID and password. And we look forward to seeing you.
And I think we have one more slide. So we have maybe 1 minute left. So really quick, tell me your chapter or your group's greatest lesson learned in the chat. And we'll run through those really quick. And then if we want to skip to the last slide here. So yeah, here it is. Oh, not that one back. So this is the session on attending the in-person versus virtual. That is the question. So there's a session on Tuesday and there's a session on Friday. So if you guys want to learn more about when to go back in person, how to go back in person, what you should do, how you should track your people, whether you think you're going to be responsible for contact tracing, or what that's going to look like. So we do recover, we are resilient. Those are really good lessons learned. I think one of my chapter's biggest lessons was always have a Zoom buddy. That was huge for us. What about everyone else out there? Anyone have any other questions or comments? We have maybe 1 minute left. I love what people have shared. It's all about learning going forward. We need to maintain virtual as well as in-person meetings. That's a good point, Alvin. I think you should bring that up at the session regarding that, because I think that is an area of interest to everyone, really. Bonnie, what else you got?
One thing I have is the ability to learn about not being judgmental. We have folks who, for whatever reason, many related to COVID, that do not want to attend in person or do not want to sit in a depression and bipolar support alliance meeting with a mask on. And I can't express that enough that as facilitators, we just need to be very aware of that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. All right, well, I think, oh, one more comment. I think Zoom in some way is here to stay, but since I have been back to in person, I prefer it to see faces, even if masks. And then someone else said, I feel more connected to people because I can see them all the time instead of in a circle. Yeah, that's actually a really good point. Both points. Very well made. Thank you everyone for attending today's session. We really appreciate it. You guys were a great audience. Bonnie and I were so happy to host this. Stay safe, stay healthy. Carla, any other final words?
Nothing from me. Thank you to everyone for making time. Enjoy the rest of the summit.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Bye.
much, everybody.
Thanks, Bonnie. Thanks, Carla. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.